The woman paused at the edge of the ranch, as if crossing an invisible line might take the last of her strength. The land stretched wide and dry, the sun hanging low but still heavy, casting long shadows across the cracked earth. Dust clung to her shoes, her hem, her skin. She had been walking since morning, maybe longer. Time had blurred into aching steps and shallow breaths. Her stomach twisted painfully, a hollow reminder that she had eaten nothing since the day before, maybe the day before that. She pressed a hand against her side, steadying herself, and looked ahead at the weathered house and the barn beyond it, their wooden boards faded by years of sun and wind. In her right hand, she held a ring. It was small, plain, and dull with age, but she had polished it earlier with the corner of her sleeve until it caught the light. Gold still shone, even when everything else wore away. The ring felt heavier than it should have, not because of its weight, but because of what it carried: memories, promises, a life she no longer had. She had sworn never to part with it. Yet here she was, fingers wrapped tightly around it, walking toward strangers with nothing left to offer but that final piece of her past. On the porch, a young man sat hunched over his saddle, his sleeves rolled up, hands busy tightening a strap. The leather creaked softly under his grip. He hadn't noticed her yet. She stopped again, suddenly unsure. Pride rose up in her chest, sharp and painful. She could turn back. She could keep walking, even if it meant collapsing somewhere along the road. But the image of food, anything warm, anything solid, pushed her forward. Her boots scuffed against the dirt as she took another step. The sound made him look up. His eyes narrowed slightly, not in anger but in caution, the way someone living far from town learned to look at unexpected visitors. He straightened slowly, wiping his hands on a rag, his gaze moving over her face, her clothes, the way she stood as if one strong wind might knock her down. "I'm sorry to bother you," she said, her voice barely louder than the breeze. It cracked on the last word. She swallowed and tried again. "I don't mean trouble." He said nothing at first, just watched her. Silence stretched between them, thick and uncomfortable. She felt suddenly exposed, like the land around her, empty, dry, stripped of shelter. "I haven't eaten," she continued, forcing the words out before fear could stop her. I was hoping you might have some food. Just enough to get me through today." The young man leaned back against the porch railing, still silent. She could see uncertainty flicker across his face, maybe suspicion, maybe concern. She knew how she must look: thin, dusty, desperate. People like her often brought problems with them. Her fingers tightened around the ring until the edge pressed into her skin. Slowly, as if afraid someone might stop her, she lifted her hand and opened her palm. The ring lay there, catching the sunlight, a quiet, stubborn glint of gold against her dirt-stained skin. "I can pay," she said quickly, the words tumbling out now. "It's real gold. It was my mother's. I know it's not much, but it's all I have left." Her throat burned as she spoke. "Please." For a moment, the only sound was the distant lowing of cattle and the creak of the porch wood as the man shifted his weight. His eyes dropped to the ring. She watched his face carefully, searching for any sign: greed, interest, rejection. Her heart pounded so loudly she was sure he could hear it. She remembered the day she received the ring, the warmth of another hand slipping it onto her finger, the laughter, the certainty that life would always have a place for her. That certainty felt foolish now. Hunger had a way of stripping illusions bare. The man straightened and stepped closer. Each step made her nerves tighten. She braced herself for refusal, for the polite dismissal she had heard too many times already. "I can't help," they would say. Or worse, "Go somewhere else." He stopped an arm's length away. Up close, she noticed the dust on his boots, the calluses on his hands, the sunburn along his neck. This was someone who worked hard, someone who understood scarcity. Maybe that was why hope flared again, small and dangerous. He reached out, not for the ring, but toward her hand itself, then hesitated, pulling back slightly, as if unsure whether the gesture would be welcome. His eyes lifted from the gold to her face, really looking at her now. Not just at her hunger, but at the exhaustion beneath it, the quiet resolve it took to stand there and ask. She felt her shoulders sag under his gaze. The strength she had held on to during the walk finally began to give way. Her hand trembled openly now, the ring rattling softly in her palm. "I don't need much," she whispered. "Bread. Anything." The wind picked up, stirring dust around their feet, and she suddenly felt very small against the wide land and the tall man standing before her. She waited, breath held, knowing that whatever he said next would decide whether she walked away with something to eat or with nothing at all. His expression softened, though she didn't yet understand what that meant. The ring still lay untouched in her open hand, gleaming quietly, as if making its own silent plea. The young man did not take the ring. Instead, he closed her fingers gently around it, his touch careful, almost respectful, as though he understood the weight it carried. The simple act startled her more than rejection would have. She looked up at him, confusion written plainly across her face, but he was already turning, motioning for her to follow. "Come inside," he said, his voice steady and calm, as if the decision had been made long before she arrived. "You shouldn't be standing out here." She hesitated, her instincts torn between disbelief and exhaustion. People didn't refuse gold. They certainly didn't refuse it and offer help instead. Yet her legs moved before her thoughts caught up, and she followed him toward the house, each step feeling unreal. The porch creaked under their weight, the sound echoing loudly in the quiet afternoon. He pushed the door open, and warmth spilled out, heat, light, and a smell so rich it nearly brought her to her knees. Bread. Real bread, fresh and warm. Her breath caught, and for a moment she simply stood there, afraid that stepping fully inside might break whatever fragile kindness had appeared in her path. The kitchen was simple but clean, sunlight filtering through a small window, dust motes dancing in the air. A loaf rested on the table, steam barely visible as it escaped through a crack in the crust. Nearby, a pot simmered quietly, the gentle sound of boiling water filling the room. "Sit," he said, pulling out a chair. "You look like you might fall over." She lowered herself onto the chair slowly, carefully, as if her body had forgotten how to trust solid ground. Her hands rested in her lap, still curled around the ring. She hadn't put it away. She wasn't ready to. Letting go of it, even now, felt dangerous. He set a thick slice of bread in front of her, along with a cup of water. She stared at it, her eyes stinging. She couldn't remember the last time someone had placed food in front of her without demanding something in return. Her throat tightened as she reached for the bread, fingers brushing the crust. The warmth soaked into her skin. "Go on," he said gently. "Eat." She did. The first bite was almost painful, her stomach protesting after so long without proper food. She chewed slowly, savoring it, afraid of finishing too quickly. Tears slid down her cheeks without warning. She turned her head slightly, embarrassed, but he pretended not to notice, busying himself by pouring another cup of water. As she ate, strength began to seep back into her limbs. The fog in her head thinned. She became aware again of the room, the solid table beneath her hands, the sound of footsteps somewhere deeper in the house. Life continued here, steady and real, untouched by the desperation she had been living in. After a while, she forced herself to stop and look up at him. "I can still pay," she said quietly, opening her hand and placing the ring on the table between them. It made a soft clink against the wood. "I don't want charity." He glanced at the ring, then met her eyes. "Gold isn't what we need," he said, the words simple, spoken without drama. "You are." She frowned, not understanding. "I don't follow." He leaned back against the counter, crossing his arms. "This ranch doesn't run itself. My father's getting older. We're short on hands, good hands. People who can work, who can stay." His gaze was steady, not appraising her body, but measuring something deeper. "You walked a long way to get here. That tells me enough." She swallowed. "You don't even know me." He nodded. "That's true. But I know hunger. And I know what it costs to ask for help." He gestured toward the ring. "Anyone willing to give up something like that just to eat isn't weak. They're desperate and still standing." Her chest tightened. No one had spoken about her that way in a long time. Not since before everything had fallen apart. She thought of the nights spent sleeping in borrowed corners, the days walking with no clear destination, the way people's eyes slid past her as if she were already gone. "What would you want from me?" she asked carefully. "Work," he replied. "Honest work. Helping with the animals, the house, whatever needs doing. Food, a place to sleep. That's the trade." He paused, then added, "If you want it." She looked down at the ring again. Its surface reflected a small patch of sunlight, bright and stubborn. Slowly, she picked it up and slid it back onto her finger. For the first time since she'd started carrying it like a burden, it felt lighter. "I can work," she said. Her voice was firmer now. "I'm not afraid of hard days." A faint smile touched his face. "Good. Hard days are what we have most of." He turned and ladled soup into a bowl, setting it in front of her. The smell rose up, rich and comforting. "Finish eating. We'll talk more after." She nodded, a quiet sense of relief settling into her bones. As she lifted the spoon, she realized something had shifted inside her. She had come to this place ready to trade away the last piece of her past for a meal. Instead, she had been offered a future uncertain, demanding, but real. Outside, the wind continued to move across the open land, just as it always had. But inside the small kitchen, warmth held steady. And for the first time in a long while, she was no longer just surviving the moment. She was being invited to stay.